بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا إنك أنت الجواد الكريم السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Welcome to another episode in this series on Al-Qawaid al-Fiqhiyya, Islamic legal maxims. And in previous episodes, we've dealt with 4 of the 5 leading maxims and some of their corollaries. In this session, we'll be dealing with the 5th of the 5 leading maxims, Al-'adatu muhakkama. Custom is an arbiter. And this maxim, like the other 4 of the leading ones, is agreed upon amongst all the major schools of thought. And what this maxim does is it affirms that people's customs have a certain role to play in determining usually the details of certain Sharia rulings. And this role is limited. It's not wide open, and we'll get into some of those limitations later as we begin to explain what the maxim means. So, like most fiqh maxims, this one is extremely brief. I mean, you can't get any briefer than 2 words. Al-'adatu muhakkama. So the first word here, 'ada, comes from the verb 'ada ya'udu, to return. And so 'ada is an act that a person or a people return to again and again. So it's a recurrent act. And from the same root word you get the word Eid, because Eid is a festival that recurs every year, comes around that same time. Or the other word in the maxim is muhakkama. So this comes from the verb hakkama yuhakkimu, which means to take somebody as an arbiter. So there's an official legal system, and parallel with it, there can be an unofficial way of settling disputes. And that's actually been enshrined in the contemporary Western legal system also. They call it alternative dispute resolution, where instead of going to a court, the 2 disputants, they take their dispute to somebody that they both agree will make a judgment in their dispute, and then they will agree to be bound by his decision. So, muhakkama here refers to the status of custom in this context, that it is a kind of an arbiter in case of arising disputes, or also in case of just questions. What is the parameter of this rule in this situation? You refer to custom to determine it. There's another word that's related to the word 'ada, and that's the word 'urf. And it's also translated as custom. It's derived from a word 'arafa ya'rifu, which means to recognize. And so the link between the meaning of the verb and the meaning of the noun is that when there are customs in a society, standard practices that everybody recognizes as the way things should be, that's called urf. And a word related to that also is ma'ruf, which is the passive participle of it. So ma'ruf is what everybody knows to be right. And when we get to the textual evidence for this maxim, you see that it usually revolves around the word urf and the word ma'ruf. And there's a subtle difference between ada and urf. Ada is more general in the sense that it can be the custom of a people or a group or even a single person, whereas urf is never the custom of a single person. It's the custom of an entire people or some subculture, some group within a larger culture. Now, it's important to understand that not every custom is authoritative. Not every custom can be referred back to determine Sharia rules. And the place of custom in providing parameters for Sharia rules is really in areas where the Sharia is silent in one way or another, either in a detailed ruling or in the parameters for a ruling. So one of the places where ada comes to bear is in interpreting or in qualifying unrestricted texts. For instance, with regard to shortening the prayer, the Quranic verse that mentions that, it says, وَإِذَا ضَرَبْتُمْ فِي الْأَرْضِ فَلَيْسَ عَلَيْكُمْ جُنَاحٌ أَن تَقْصُرُوا مِنَ الصَّلَاةِ. When you travel across the earth, ضَرَبْتُمْ فِي الْأَرْضِ, then there is no blame upon you if you shorten your prayer. So, ضَرَبْتُمْ فِي الْأَرْضِ doesn't have some specific number of miles, and there's no specific Sharia text that says, okay, when you go this many miles, you're now considered to be a traveler. And because fiqh is about providing precise parameters for people, scholars made ijtihad and they said, okay, based on this or that, we're going to put a number on it. 48 miles. If you go 47 miles, you're not a traveler. If you go 48 and above, it means you're a traveler. Ibn Qudama, when he talks about this whole issue, discusses the various evidences, and he comes to the conclusion that the Sharia has not put down a specific parameter for what it means to be a traveler, and therefore it should be referred back to the Arabic language and custom. So Imam As-Suyuti, rahimahullah, with regard to this issue, he said, anything mentioned in a Sharia text without qualifications, when there are no parameters for it in the Sharia or the Arabic language, should be referred to custom. And so then the second area where custom comes into play is establishing Sharia rulings for issues that are not explicitly mentioned in the Sharia text. So when we look at the Quran in particular, it has very few specific detailed rulings. Quranic statements, Quranic commands tend to be general, and the Sunnah is the normal place to look at for more detailed parameters for those Quranic statements. But the Sunnah also doesn't cover every conceivable eventuality, and a great deal of the Sunnah was things that the Prophet ﷺ did in the context in which he lived, and statements that he made in that same context. So as times change and as customs change, then some of those issues need to be referred to custom in order to determine the parameters for how the rules apply. And then if there is a rule that's based upon the custom of a given time and place, as customs change, then the rule would also have to be updated. If the rule is based on custom, then as the custom changes, then the rule would have to also change. In this regard, Imam al-Qarafi, a great Maliki scholar, lived in Egypt, was a student of Al-Izz ibn Abdus Salam, and he wrote this really towering book called Al-Furuq, short name for it, where he goes into all the details about rulings that seem to be similar, but they're really different. So he discusses the place of custom in determining Sharia rulings in the course of that book. And he says, the translation, to keep applying the Sharia rulings derived from customs after the customs have changed conflicts with consensus, ijma', and is a manifestation of ignorance of the religion. In fact, any aspect of the Sharia that follows customs changes as the customs change, to the extent dictated by the evolving custom. So now let's look at the conditions that must be met in order for a custom to be recognized by the Sharia. We'll do that after the break, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum, peace be with you. I am Zain Bika from South Africa, and you are watching Peace TV, the solution for humanity.
Where truth is hidden and misleading quotations create confusion. Where truth is hidden, lack of knowledge and wisdom cause upheaval and commotion. Where truth is hidden, manipulated scriptures and twisted facts emerge. This very hidden truth creates false propaganda, mayhem, chaos, disorder, and turmoil in our lives and the world order. But is there anyone with courage and wisdom? What is the truth, and who has the courage to expose it? Because it's your right to know the truth.
Watch Truth Prevail and Lies Perish in Truth Exposed by Dr. Zakir Naik every Sunday to Friday at 9 p.m. and repeat telecast at 7:30 a.m. India on Peace TV. The night of decree is better than 1,000 months. The benefits of worship and the vigil in the night of power.
Ramadan, which is the topic of the show. Do you have any advice for our viewers?
Asad Ahmad,
Especially in the blessed month of Ramadan.
The Ramadan is the reminder of rectifying our behavior.
Dr. Ali Shaban,
Ramadan is a unique opportunity for every Muslim.
and the reasons behind this revelation and its power emphasized as the human heart transcends towards godly glory.
If you apply Ramadan to the rest of the year,
Tariq Ali
surely you are going to be much, much better in all fields, all aspects.
and the gratitude of the soul reaches out to worship the Almighty One on this esteemed night.
Just to stick more and more of time to the Holy Quran.
Dr. Muhammad Ibrahim,
This is my advice to all my Muslim brothers.
let's strive to seek the night of power and its bliss in Blessed Nights every Friday at 4:30 p.m. and repeat telecast at 3:30 a.m. India on Peace TV.
Assalamu alaikum, welcome back. We're talking about the parameters for when a custom will be granted consideration by the Sharia. So the very first and the most important hurdle that a custom has to pass is that it should not conflict with an explicit, detailed Sharia text or with firmly established principles of the Sharia. So if a custom conflicts with such a text or a principle, then it's considered urf batil. This is a false custom, a custom that is given no consideration. For instance, charging interest on a loan. You can hardly turn around, you can hardly go anywhere in the world where this custom of charging interest on a loan is not applied, because it's almost universal doesn't make it right. The Sharia rejects it. Another example of urf batil would be, for instance, let's say that the people of America become Muslims. Now, the current custom in America is that men and women date, and after a date or two, even the first date, they'll end up sleeping together. They're not married to each other. And it's rare to find anybody who doesn't observe that custom in the course of their life, particularly young adulthood. So if those people were to become Muslims, that's a custom that they would have to abandon because it's explicitly prohibited by the Sharia. It's ma'lum min ad-dini bid-darura. It's like every Muslim is supposed to know that. It's not something that you can do. Another example of urf batil would be holidays that have their roots in some kind of a pagan practice. So Halloween, it's associated with this idea that the dead come back. The door between the world we see and the unseen world is opened on that night, and these spirits of the dead roam around on the earth, and you have to appease them by dressing up in strange costumes. That has its roots in this totally pagan concept. So, it's not something that Muslims should participate in. A false custom that is widespread even among Muslims in the Indian subcontinent, that when a man and a woman get married, the woman's supposed to give a sum of money, a present, a dowry to her husband. So this is inherited from Hinduism. It clashes with explicit Sharia text. It's the man who's supposed to give the woman the mahar, not the other way around. So these are examples of false customs. Another consideration for a custom to be given consideration is it must be broadly practiced in the society. It's like everybody does it, or it's almost everybody does it. So that's for a general custom. If it's within some subculture in the larger society, the same must hold true for that subculture. So for businessmen in particular, there's a special corollary of this maxim that deals with business practices. So, if all businessmen acknowledge a certain practice, or 95% of them do it, then that kind of a custom would have legal weight. An example of that is, gold and silver are mentioned in the Quran and the Sunnah as media of exchange, dinars and dirhams. And in our time, they have disappeared as media of exchange. They've been replaced by fiat money. That is a highly controversial issue. There are people who say that fiat money is invalid. It's Islamically haram. That's a topic for another session, inshallah. But your average person living in a society, you don't have a choice about that. If you go down to the local grocery store and hand over gold, it will be difficult to conclude your transaction. So in that case, then because people accept this paper money in exchange for goods and services, then all the rules of zakat and riba and the rules associated with exchanging, buying and selling gold and silver, all those rules also apply to currencies. Another criterion is that the custom should be existent at the time of the action, which means effectively that it must have been in practice already by the time that the action that we're looking at has occurred. So an example of this is somebody several hundred years ago in Egypt establishes a waqf, a charitable endowment, and he specifies that the beneficiary of this waqf are the ulama of Al-Azhar. Now, in those days, ulama, that term referred to people who were well-versed experts in the Arabic language and in the Sharia in general. In the 20th century, other disciplines were added to the curriculum of Al-Azhar. So you'll find teachers at branches of Al-Azhar who are doctors or some other specialty. So if some issue were to come up that are these other teachers to be considered beneficiaries of this waqf, this parameter would dictate that not really, because the person who set it up, what he understood from ulama was this category of people who are expert in Arabic and Sharia. Another important hurdle that has to be passed for custom to be given legal consideration is that, let's say you have a contract and the two contracting parties agree to a term that is in conflict with custom. In that situation, what the two parties have agreed to overrides the custom of the land. So, for instance, the custom is normally that you pay rent at the beginning of the month. If for some reason the leaseor and the leasee agree that the leasee will pay at the end of the month, then that term would take precedence over the widely practiced custom. Another example of that would be who pays for transferring the title in a house purchase? Should it be the buyer or the seller? In most places it would be the buyer. But if the two parties agree that the seller will pay the fees for that transfer, then that would become binding upon the seller, and custom would not be relevant. Let's turn to the authority of the maxim. In Surah Al-A'raf, Allah says, "Ba'da'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, khudh al-afwa wa'mur bil-'urf wa'a'rid 'anil jahilin." Be tolerant and enjoin what is right, al-'urf, and pay no attention to foolish people. So the angle of argument from this verse is that urf here is referring to what was recognized as correct behavior at the time that Quran was revealed. And in another verse in Surah An-Nisa, when describing the issue of the suckling of a newborn child, وَالْوَالِدَاتُ يُرْضِعْنَ أَوْلَادَهُنَّ حَوْلَيْنِ كَامِلَيْنِ لِمَنْ أَرَادَ أَنْ يُتِمَّ الرَّضَاعَةَ وَعَلَى الْمَوْلُودِ لَهُ رِزْقُهُنَّ وَكِسْوَتُهُنَّ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ. Mothers suckle their children for 2 whole years for those who wish to complete the term. And the father shall bear the cost of their food and clothing in a fair manner. So the wording "in a fair manner" is a translation of bil ma'ruf, and ma'ruf is derived from the root word urf. So it also carries that meaning of recognized and approved behavior. So the amount of maintenance that the father would be required to spend is in accord with custom. So it would differ from one time to another time, it would differ from place to place, and it would differ even within social class in a given time and place. You also see evidence for this in the hadith where Hind, the wife of Abu Sufyan, she complained to the Prophet ﷺ. I mean, they had just accepted Islam, it was conquest of Mecca. She comes to the Prophet ﷺ and she says, "Messenger of Allah, Abu Sufyan is rajulun shahih. He's a stingy man. He doesn't give me enough for the expenses of myself and my children. Can I take from his wealth without him knowing it?" And the Prophet ﷺ said, "Take what is sufficient for you and your children according to what is customary." So again, this is an example of recognizing custom. One more example, and we're going to run out of time, I think. Something that we mentioned earlier. The Prophet ﷺ, when he came to Medina, he found the people practicing forward sales of dates. Somebody would pay today for delivery of dates not even after a year, after 2 or 3 years. And the Prophet ﷺ, he didn't prohibit this custom, but he laid down parameters to avoid disputes arising out of the practice. So he said, if you're going to do that, then it should be for a specified quantity and a specific delivery date. So the Prophet ﷺ, he didn't outlaw the practice. It was something that was being done when he got there. He looked at it and he confirmed it in general, but then he regulated it. Another statement that sometimes some people think that it's a hadith. This is also mentioned in discussions of this topic. It's not actually a hadith, it's a statement of Abdullah bin Mas'ud. ما رآه المسلمون حسنا فهو عند الله حسن وما رأوه سيئا فهو عند الله سيء. What the Muslims, and the Muslims here means all the Muslims, what the Muslims in general consider to be good is good in the sight of Allah. And what they consider to be bad is bad in the sight of Allah. We've run out of time. We're going to have to carry this to another episode for the wrap-up, and we'll do that next time, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.